Hello, my name is Rox. I have made this video to address and discuss accusations and allegations against me that have recently been making the rounds in a lot of servers and media that I'm in, and servers that I'm not in. Before I continue, I must address that this video will contain a lot of NSFW content and mentions of it, just as a fair warning before we begin. If you weren't aware of the meaning of NSFW before this video, NSFW means not safe for work. And in the content of this video, it refers to sexual content. And most importantly, this video was not made to antagonize or send hate to anyone. I never want to wish any harm upon the people involved with the situation with me. This video's sole purpose is to give some insight on what happened 2 to 3 years ago in 2 different communities. With that out of the way, let me begin to explain the timeline. To begin to illustrate the timeline of events, in 2019, I joined a Roblox game community called Slam Dunk Studios, the group behind the game Brawl. Brawl was a fighting game where you played as different computer viruses fighting each other, and the roleplay game had a wide variety of characters that you could play as. Through that year, I would become more and more connected with the community and even contribute some creations into the game, as well as helping with some model work. In the years of 2019 through 2020, however, was when I was a very immature person. I was very selfish, bossy, rude, and generally not a great person to be around in the server. The reason this was the case is because this was the first ever public server I'd been in. Before a public server, my only introduction to the internet was through sparse friend groups. To continue on, in 2020, I was promoted to be a moderator in the server, along with a couple other people at the time. From mid-2020 to late 2020, I also hosted a fan server for Brawl, which had its own community and fan game, Brawl Plus. And from that group, and also Slam Dunk Studios, many friend servers would emerge. And it's at this point where I have to explain the groomer accusation. A few months after I joined Slam Dunk Studios in early 2019, I met someone, whom, for privacy reasons, I will refer to as Paige. Over the course of a few months, Paige and I became pretty close friends, and after a little while, I had formed a crush on her. In the friends server that I owned, I met someone else. Once again, for the sake of privacy, I will refer to him as Tom. After about a month of playing games and hanging out, Tom had actually asked me if we could be in a relationship, which I said yes to, despite having a crush for Paige. For the next month after that, our conversations slowly morphed from playful banter to sexual conversations. Once again, for sake of context, at the time, I was 17, and Tom was about 15 to 16 years old. And Paige was about 15 years old. At the time, me and Tom were in a lot of friend groups from the community, a lot of which included NSFW channels, with which I assume nowadays has been removed because of the issue this created. What it all essentially boiled down to in my mind was that since my friends were doing it, it was okay for me to do it, which is not the case anymore, and I know better now. Being fueled by both sides, the conversations got extremely personal and deep, to the point where we both agreed to perform NSFW acts on a Discord call. Let it be known that this was completely consensual by both of us. This does not make the behavior acceptable in any way. I'm just explaining that neither of us forced each other to do it. It was simply just a spur-of-the-moment thing that happened that night. About a couple weeks after that, I had received a message from Paige saying how they had considered thoughts of being in a relationship with me. Me, thinking in the moment, was blinded by the thought of being with my original crush, not considering the person I was already with, and I had completely dropped Tom in the process. This was incredibly disgusting on my part, and is in no way acceptable, and I deeply apologize to both of the people who were involved. I can't exactly remember the layout of certain events, due to how long it's been, but somewhere in the mix there was someone we will call Buddy. Buddy at the time was 13 years old and also had a crush on Paige. Me and Buddy became friends after Paige introduced me to them, and Buddy and I began to talk to each other about Paige in the same vein that I was talking about with Tom. In case if you were wondering, this is where the 13 to 17-year-old allegation pops up. My sincerest apologies and condolences to Paige for having to hear the truth of our conversations. But some of the things mentioned by Buddy were blown way out of proportion in regards to what was actually said. For example, Buddy had mentioned that the way I said these things made it sound like I objectified Paige, when that couldn't be further from the truth. I cared a lot about Paige and her well-being. At the time, she meant a lot to me being my friend, and back then, I showed my appreciation to them in any way I could. It's just that in that point in history, I was unaware that my behavior was unacceptable and absolutely not the way to talk about others. So while I take the blame for talking about them in the way mentioned in Buddy's post to Paige, it was not to the proportions stated. If either Paige or Buddy is watching this video, I would greatly appreciate if we were able to discuss this further and possibly make amends to the wrongdoings that I've done. Fast forwarding to the end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021, I had decided to leave the Data Brawl community, both for out of guilt of what happened, and because I stopped enjoying being in the community. Shortly after that, I joined the Tower Heroes community, because I loved the game, and I wanted to make some contributions there, similar to the story of how I got into Data Brawl. For context, Tower Heroes is a tower defense game owned by Pixelbit Studio, and this is where I discuss the accusation of NSFW art. This section will be a bit shorter and more to the point than the events of Slam Dunk Studios, mostly because a lot of this occurred within a shorter time span. In early to mid 2021, I had become friends with a person who had recently been banned from the server, and I wanted to be their friend in a time of need. At this time, I had not changed much from the person I was from 2020, so I was still open to the idea of drawing NSFW content, and that's pretty much how me and them bonded. They had invited me to their friend group, which, as a whole, constantly drew and viewed pornographic and NSFW content. To fit in with their group, I joined in on their art drawing, which included the art which has been circulating around, including art depicting child characters, from which I assume the allegations of pedophilia are from. And I want to completely say that I do not support pedophilia, and never have supported it, and I never will. The reason the art was created was once again made to fit in with the friend group that also drew it. I am extremely sorry for partaking in that act, and it will not happen ever again. In late May of 2021, after saying I wanted to stop being friends with them due to them beginning to disrespect other friends of mine, they retaliated by leaking my art into Pixelbit Studios, a public server full of minors, none of which consented to seeing the art. None of the art that was leaked was ever meant to be public and was solely for this friend group. After the incident in Pixelbit Studio, I left the server, to which I was then banned from. I left most, if not all, the public servers I was in, and I unfriended a lot of people. For quite a long time, I did not speak with a lot of people asking about the situation. And for the next 2 years onward, the aforementioned friend group and others would crusade to old servers that I'd been in and spread highly misconstrued information about the situation. And with such, people have been covering the situation in videos and servers with said information, which has been further spreading confusion and negativity. And so, this video is made to break that silence. My past is one of immaturity, guilt, and regret, and ever since early of last year, I've been trying my best to reach out to those involved, to apologize for things that have happened with them. Ever since these two incidents, I have changed a lot as a person. When I was banned from Pixelbit Studio in mid-2021 for what happened, I took the time to look back upon the past and to better myself. In fact, I took up keeping reptiles as a hobby for the sole purpose of giving myself time away from the internet, and time to spend with my family. In that time, I have learned to respect boundaries and to do everything I can to treat others with respect. To really drive my point home, these accusations no longer reflect me as the individual I am now. To anybody that I've caused harm to, or wronged, I'm sincerely sorry for everything that happened 2 to 3 years ago. If anyone has any further questions, or was involved and would like to get in contact with me to discuss past things, I would be more than open to it. But I hereby ask you to not join the people spreading misinformation about the situation. It harms not only me, but my friends as well. And finally, thank you. for taking the time to listen to this video. From the bottom of my heart, I really do appreciate it.